All in favour? Please, either by hand or voice.
Aye.
Against? So that carried. Councillors, the next item on our agenda is item 12, and it's the Director of Infrastructure Services reports. I'll call on Mr. Bartlett to detail his recommendations, starting with item 12.1, which is waive showground fees for vaccination clinic. Thank you, Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's approval for North West Medical to hold drive-through influenza and COVID-19 vaccination clinics at the Gundark Showground and to waive the associated fees.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. I'll call for a member to move the recommendation to become a motion. Thank you, Councillor Hook, seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Hook has moved the motion. You wish to speak?
And to say it's a worthwhile thing to support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll call now for elected member who would like to ask a question or speak against the motion. Councillor Moses is a second to the motion. You wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That be the case. I'll put the motion on favour.
Aye.
Against? The motion carried. Moving on to the next item, which is item 12.2, Gundark Aerodrome, and I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett to detail his recommendation before you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's approval to take steps to certify the Gundark Aerodrome as per the Civil Aviation Safety Authority's requirements and to allow application for required grants to fund the upgrade of the aerodrome's tarmac, taxiway and apron as per upgrade option 2 outlined in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett, for your detailed recommendation. I'll now call for
Mr. Mayor, I move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Call for a seconder to the motion. Councillor Hook. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion as a move of the motion?
Mr. Mayor, certainly, I'll keep it brief. Look, note that a further upgrade and development and opportunities to utilise the aerodrome is listed on the delivery plan we spoke about earlier as one of our unfunded priority projects. And I guess to further develop and continue to utilise our aerodrome, it would be particularly important that it's certified to actually have aircraft land and take off from the facility. So therefore, I'll certainly be supporting this motion and believe, like we've been very successful as a shire and community, that we should seek all opportunities to seek grant funding and enable further development as outlined in the report as option number 2.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question.
Mr. Chairman, I'll technically speak against the motion, but I will actually vote for it when it comes to voting. But I will point out that I've been very reluctant to support it for a number of reasons. The first, there being the fact that we're still not getting to a point of 30% of the cost of the operation of that aerodrome, as is our policy for all such activities across the Shire. And I think it's about 24 or something to report to this afternoon. And if we keep spending like we are here, that will be even less a proportion as we go forward. And I remind councillors that Mr. Connor told us this afternoon that we keep spending and spending money which hasn't been identified in a long-term financial plan, we're going to find that we're going to be very soon in a very precarious position financially, even in a debt position. And that is not a good position to be in for a council which has gone through what we've been through in the last 9 years, the special rate variation and whatnot, which places us in a very strong position, which allowed us with significant grant funding from state and federal government to undertake all this works program that the Mayor alluded to earlier. As I said, this to me is a bit of a cart before the horse. We have to pay $255,000 from the general fund, and that does not. That only gets the certification. To maintain the certification, we then have to get one of the figures outlined here, whether it be option 1, 3,150,000, option 2, 3,800,000, or option 2, that was option 3, 2 million. And that 2 million is just to provide 10 plus areas like movements a week. So there's a lot of money being outlaid for a small group of people utilising it at the moment. But I'm, on that basis, I therefore reluctantly will support the 255,000 out of the general fund, which was not in the long-term financial plan on this occasion. But I would be vehemently opposed to putting further money in if we can't get the grant funding. The grant funding should achieve the totality of any works upgrade that we need. And if we get that, fine. If we get 2 million, we can do option 3 and so on. But I've written signal here, while I'm sitting around this table, the constant spending on this aerodrome and other activities without achieving the 30% policy position we have is untenable. It shouldn't be sustained.
Thank you, Councillor Hasler. Councillor Hook has seconded the motion. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm actually quite delighted with Councillor Hazard's position. I think it's an extremely sensible position that he's taken, that we do have the opportunity to move forward and to keep infrastructure that is so valuable to this community alive. We have really one opportunity now to be able to take that infrastructure and develop it for the future generations of this shire, keeping in mind that we have to be careful how we actually do fund that redevelopment. But we have an opportunity now to move forward to something that I believe is extremely important for this community. I see the opportunities that haven't been there in the past and now potentially there in the future. We have potentially a beginning of a tourist industry here with the opening up of the Koala Park. Potentially that could bring aircraft in here with people visiting this community, chartered aircraft coming in. There is the possibility of an RPT service coming in here. And also the fact that if you have a facility such as an airport, it underpins a certain level of confidence to people who may want to invest in this area, large investors. They feel that they can come here because this is a town that supports industry, and the airport is part of supporting industry. Not only that, we have medevac operations that may take effect. There's firefighting opportunities that potentially require the airport. There's refuelling that take place here that none of us actually hear about, from emergency services and others that fly in here to get fuel so that they can go on to their destinations. I think that there's a lot of hidden benefits from having an airport, and I really commend this council for taking the stand to actually move to the next point so that we can actually validate this airport into the future. So I recommend council support the recommendation from the officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll call for any further councillors who'd like to either speak against the motion or ask a question before I give Councillor O'Keefe the right reply. Councillor Swan.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm not really going to speak against it. Unlike Councillor Hasler, I will be voting for it, but I'm very concerned about the amount of money that's tied up out there without the opportunity for recouping a reasonable amount back. My concern is for the medical issues such as the helicopter and the aerial ambulance, and the opportunity for firefighting. And I guess we're all a little bit tied and pulled so many different ways because we know the importance of it, but I would be really anxious and would not be at all supportive of any further money coming until we get the grant funding is going to be the only thing that's going to, I think, enable us to keep it going very much longer. So I'll be voting for it, but I'm really concerned about it.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. Councillor O'Keefe, but I'm not 100% sure. I heard Councillor speaking against it, but I'll allow you the right reply if you'd like.
I'd love one, please. I'm pretty confident two of my colleagues said they were speaking against it, even if only to give them the opportunity to hear me reply. I just want to hammer home a couple of points. The first one is in support of a few of the comments Councillor Hasler and Councillor Swain made around the revenue option. And so you'll note there's some commentary in the officer's report around avenues investigated so far to increase revenue. And as the mover of the original motion that set that investigation and trigger, to be blunt, it probably hasn't really, the investigations haven't really lived up to what my expectations were. And I chose not to move a rider onto this motion to go further. I'll actually bring this a notice of motion to a future council meeting. You know, effectively, I'm on a unity ticket that we need to work out how to increase our revenue and our return from this facility as a shire. And I believe it's high in the queue of being one of the next cabs off the rank for a precinct master planning process, which we've been very successful doing as a council. The other thing I want to stress or point out, and I know it's been picked up by others, but it's been mentioned that only a small section of our community use the facility. One of the points I want to hammer home as someone who lives under the flight path, either the last turn before you land or the first turn after you take off, depending on the wind direction, is in the last 4 years of the time we've been on council, we've averaged 65 aeromedical retrievals per annum out of that airport. And that completely excludes the Westpac Rescue Helicopter Service visiting the hospital, which is not infrequent. Most of those aeromedical retrievals don't happen in the middle of the day. Again, as someone who hears them come in, and most of you know my wife and know that I'm an avid user of Flight Radar 24, and every time I hear a plane going overhead, I pull my phone out and check what it is, where it's come from, and who owns it and what it's doing. And notwithstanding the sheer count and number of times the Royal Flying Doctor Service or Area Ambulance New South Wales provide life-saving transport for our community in the hours of darkness, often out of that airport. That's 65 residents per annum that if we don't seek certification, won't get access to that transport facility. It is actually genuinely surprising the amount of aircraft, particularly with multiple engines and generally available for hire by charter services, use our airport and visit. And notionally, people paying for those services are here to do business. So don't underestimate the enabler that facility is commercially for our community. And if we don't keep ourselves in the game, at least by certification, and certainly we need to work how we drive better revenue return without turning away business from that facility. So I've said my bit, I commend the recommendation to you, and I'm sure there'll be more on this topic as there rightly should be.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. It's great to see some passionate debate there. So councillors, now I'm going to put that motion all in favour by show of hands, please. Unanimously supported. Fantastic. Thank you. We'll now move on to our next item on the agenda, 4.3, which is request to roll funding from Capital Works Program. I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett to detail the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's approval for the transfer of funding from Capital Works programs for the fuel bowser upgrades and the depot handling bonds from the current financial year to next financial year as a result of the impacts COVID-19 has had on the availability of specialist contractors.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. The Therefore, Collective Member move the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Campbell, and seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Campbell has moved the motion. Mr. Speaker.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Our elected member who'd like to speak against the motion, I ask the question. Councillor Moses, the second of the motion, you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr.
Chair, the
Mayor.
case, then I'll put the motion on favour.
Aye.
Against? The motion carried. Moving on, item 12.4, request to transfer funding from Capital Works Program. I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett to detail the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's approval for the transfer of funding from Capital Works programs, renovate and fit out small plant shed and upgrade depot access key to accommodate for the unforeseen premature failures of the depot security gate and the workshop light vehicle access roller door.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Call for elected member to move the recommendation to become a motion. Thank you, Councillor Hook, seconded by Councillor Fuller. Councillor Hook, do you wish to speak as the member of the motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Elected member who'd like to speak against the motion, ask the question. Councillor Fuller is the second of the motion, wish to speak.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Declare the case. Can I put the motion on the table? Against? Declare the motion carried. Moving on. Item number 12.5, Port Thistle Road Water Main Renewal. I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett for detailed recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. This report is to seek approval to make changes to the 2021 and 21-22 operational plan for the Gunnedah Water Supply Main Replacement Program due to the unexpected multiple failures of a section of 150mm water main in Port Thistle Road that has caused multiple disruptions to a number of businesses in the area.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Call for elected member. Thank you, Councillor Luke, and seconded by Councillor Swan. Councillor Luke, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
The elected member would like to speak against the motion. Councillor Swan is the second of the motion. Wish to speak.
No, thank you.
Which one's?
It's 12.5, Port Thistle Road Water Main Renewal. Councillor. There's no more debate, councillors. I'll put the motion on the table. Against? Declare that motion carried. Moving on, item 12.6, South Street Reservoir Pool Internal Coating, and I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett for your recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you, the purpose of this report is to inform Council of the condition of the internal surface of the South Street Reservoir and to request additional funding to fully coat the reservoir that will add an additional 50 years of life to the reservoir.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Call for elected member to move the recommendation to become a motion.
I'll do so to allow me to ask a question.
Call for a second to the motion. Thank you, councillor. Councillor Haslett has moved the motion. You wish to speak.
I'd like to ask a question first of all. I find this is the third time I think this reservoir has come to us. I can't understand why there wasn't a full investigation of the whole reservoir at the outset, so that we had a recommendation which would dealt with all of these issues from the outset, rather than doing it in what now appears to be stages. So maybe as a layperson, I'm ignorant of the processes of which people come to these conclusions. But the second thing, I looked at option 4 on page 101. There's a paragraph there which talks about the length of the roof as compared to the walls. If we wait 5 years to do, isn't it the reverse? The walls of the reservoir will be 50 years, and the roof, because we're done with to do that now and wait to do the walls in 5 years' time, will be 45. Here, what it says here is the reverse.
Thank you, Councillor Haslett, for the question. Through you, Mr Mayor. I guess I can certainly appreciate sentiments around the multiple reports on this particular issue. I guess my explanation for that is that the issues that we've come back to Council to inform Council of to seek further funding are actually issues that are unable to be uncovered or understood, observed, identified before we actually undertake these works. So in this particular instance, without actually stripping off the existing internal coating on the reservoir, it's impossible to tell the condition of what's underneath it. And that's what's led us to be able to actually identify what the problem is here now. In terms of the second component of the question, Councillor Haslett, I'll need to take that one on notice and actually have a more detailed read and digestion of exactly what it is you're referring to. But my understanding is that that option, as a staged option, will not result in the same. Sorry, it will still result in the same useful life of the overall asset. However, when the whole of life costs are annualised, it actually results in increased costs because we end up with multiple establishments, and undertaking that component of the works in 5 years' time will actually result in a larger overall cost to achieve the same outcome.
Thank you. My only comment would be I still don't understand why, if this was a likelihood of this happening as the walls being in the condition they are, why we didn't empty the reservoir at the outset and check it all so that we had a complete knowledge of what condition it was in. I mean, we've had a talk today about the, which we'll deal with later on, about another reservoir having the two of them, etc. But I mean, this is not uncommon, surely, that this happens to reservoirs. So I don't understand how we didn't do a complete check before we commenced any work on it.
Thank you, Councillor Hasler, for the further question, and through you, Mr Mayor. The reservoir was drained and visually inspected before the initial works were scoped. However, the underlying condition of the steel underneath the existing coating is unable to be observed through that process. You actually have to remove it entirely to see the condition of the underlying steel.
Our call for elected member who'd like to ask a further question or speak against the motion. Councillor Liu.
A light-hearted comment, if I may, Mr Mayor, with this wondrous coating that's going to give us a 50-year extension to this receptacle for water. There's other things filled with water in this town that might also benefit from such a coating, and perhaps we could think about that too. It sounds wondrous stuff.
Councillor O'Keefe is the second of the motion. You wish to speak?
Look, I was going to ask a simple question. I also thank the director for walking us through the costings in the report and the explanation of how we got to have got. Simplistically, I know unforeseen items are unforeseen, but do we think there are any other areas where we could be exposed to a significant scope creep in this reservoir, or realistically, do we think we've exhausted all possible things that could be replaced?
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. The question through you, Mr Mayor. On this particular project, this is highly likely to be the last of those unknown things.
Now call for elected member who would like to speak against the motion or ask a further question before I put the motion. In the case of the motion, all in favour?
No.
Against? The motion carried. Moving right along, item 12.7, 2021 Local Roads Congress, and I'll get back to Mr. Bartlett with the detailed recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to inform councillors of the 2021 New South Wales Local Roads Congress to be held at New South Wales Parliament House on the 7th of June 2021, and to determine the councillor attendee.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. I'll now call for nominations. Councillor Fuller.
Would you like to please?
I happily accept the nomination. I'll call for any further nominations. No further nominations. I'll call again. Thank you. I'll accept that. So now we have a recommendation that reads that council endorse the attendance of Councillor Jay Chaffey to accompany the Director of Infrastructure Services to attend the 2021 Local Roads Congress to be held at New South Wales Parliament House on Monday the 7th of June. Councillor Hook, would you like to move that recommendation to become a motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hook. Councillor Hook, as the member, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
I call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Luke is the second. Do you wish to speak?
No, thanks, Mr
Be the
Mayor.
case, then I'll put the motion in favour. Against? Declare the motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Bartlett, for your contribution. We're moving on to item number 13, which is Chief Financial Officer's report. I'll call on Mr. Connor to detail his recommendation in item 13.1 investments.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you, councillors, I will simply put the recommendation as read and welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. I'll now call for an elected member to move the recommendation to become a motion. Thank you, Councillor Swain, seconded by Councillor Luke. Councillor Swain, do you wish to speak to the motion as the mover?
I'm just happy to make the comment, Mr Mayor, that I'm very happy to move the motion of that we have an investment of $65.8 million at the moment. Thank you.
I now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Luke is the seconder of the motion. Do you wish to speak?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
In case, I'll put the motion all in favour. Against? Declare the motion carried. And Mr. Connor, thank you for your contributions to our April ordinary meeting of council. Moving on, item 14, reports to committees. 14.1 is the audit committee meeting minutes from the 17th of March. And I'll call for a mover. Thank you, Councillor Campbell, as our representative, moved, and I'll call for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Campbell, as the mover, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Elected member who'd like to ask a question. or speak against this motion? Councillor Fuller is the second to the motion.
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
Being the case, put the motion on favour? Against? Declare the motion carried. Moving on, 14.2, which is the Planning, Environment and Development Committee meeting report from the 7th of April. I'll call for an elected member to move that the committee report be held correct. It'll be Councillor Swain and endorsed, and seconded by Councillor Isaacs. Councillor Swain, is there, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
I would elected member who'd like to speak against the motion, ask a question. Councillor Isaacs, second motion, just to speak.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Being the case, then put the motion on the table.
Aye.
Against? Declare the motion carried. Moving on, item 15, delegates report. 15.1 is the Murray Darling Association board meeting that was held on March 2021. And we have Councillor Campbell, who's the chair of Region 11 and also a board member. Would you like to move the report? Thank you, the board meeting report. And I'll call for a second to that motion. Thank you, Councillor Hook. As a member of the motion, Councillor Campbell, do you wish to speak?
I was going to say something. I had the opportunity of attending the Murray Darling Association Basin Communities Leadership Program in Colorado a couple of weeks ago. There was about 10 people on the course, and there was a couple of people, young one, only 16, from Walgett, and he was a very impressive young lad. His father was doing the course as well, and if that's the guys that we're going to have coming to some of the stuff that the MBA puts on, the future looks good.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I'll call an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the report. No. Councillor Hook is the second of the motion. You wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
In the case, put the motion on favour.
Aye.
Against? Declare the motion carried. Moving on to item 15.2, which is the Australian Local Government Women's Association Conference between the 18th and the 20th of March. And I'll call for a mover. I believe that report was supplied by Councillor Luke. Would you like to move your report? Thank you, Councillor Luke. And I'll call for a second to that report. Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Luke, as the mover of that report, would you like to speak to the report?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I hope people to read this report. And just to reinforce in my commentary, I thought a positively discriminating organisation such as ALGA was something that I would actually never need to be part of. But there are some really tough things that have gone on with people in positions such as local government, whether they're employees, whether they're the elected representatives, and the stories that I did hear of at that conference certainly opened my eyes. And I do reiterate what I said in the report, in that we are lucky in this current environment in this town that I don't feel any pressure being a woman or being in a male-dominated world or there being any glass ceiling. I do think that there are times when this sort of organisation is really needed, and I do thank Councillor Fuller for her dedication to the organisation, and I think it's an important thing to support into the future, because there are times when it is desperately needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Luke. I have an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion of the report. Councillor Hook.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I would like to thank Councillor Fuller and Councillor
Luke.
I think it is, for what I thought was really a very insightful but brief report. It was something that I really sort of didn't take much notice of, I must admit, and your insight into what you discovered shedded a new light on the benefits of ALGA, and certainly in the future I'll pay much more attention to it, because I think it's a very worthwhile organisation. And thank you very much for your comments, and also your comments about how this community actually engages and treats women as, I believe, are equals. Thank you.
Councillor Fuller, is the second of the motion. You wish to speak?
Only just to say thank you to Council. Thank you to Councillor Luke for coming to conference. I think Councillor Luke's right in what you're saying there. city areas, I find have lots of issues, and we are facing lots of issues for particularly the younger women in local government. And this is where Olga has been very, very supportive with our network, working together and backing up and looking after those younger women, which would be the future of either being councillors or being staff. So I thank Anne for her, or Councillor Luke for her report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions or comments before I put the motion? Be the case, put the motion, all in favour?
No.
Against? The motion carried. Item 16, councillors, which is question on notice or or notice of motion. There are no business for April. So we'll now be moving to closed meetings. So I request that the council on the motion that we go into closed meeting to discuss the reports of Councillor Cook, and seconded by Councillor Moses. I'll put that motion, all in favour? Against? The motion carried. For those listening online, please be aware that the gallery is now being cleared, and will also be going offline on this broadcast as the elected members will be discussing matters of a confidential nature. I'll come back once it's completed, and I will be reading out the determinations of the closed meeting. Thank you.